Welcome to The Truth in a Nutshell, where truth is the standard to which we hold ourselves, for it is the selfsame standard God holds us to. Today, I want to talk a little bit about the nature of God. Since time does not permit the in-depth study of the topic, I would like to focus on the four major tenets of God's nature, for as brief a time as possible while still getting the necessary wisdom across. Too many today are under the false impression that God is love and nothing more. Too many have placed the entirety of their eternity on the hope that since God is love, He will overlook sin, duplicity, hypocrisy, and disobedience in their lives, being perhaps disappointed, even sad, but never angry, because His love would not permit Him being angry. When we believe in a one-sided God, incapable of any other emotion than love, then we have a one-sided belief system which precludes us from taking seriously both the journey of faith we have committed to and the accountability it requires. Believing in a one-sided God capable only of one emotion is like having a chair with one leg when there should be four. No matter how hard one tries, there can be no balancing on a one-legged chair. So today, as quickly and succinctly as the depth and gravity of this topic will allow, we will point out the four essentials when it comes to the nature of God. First and foremost, God is spirit. John chapter 4, verse 24 tells us that God is spirit, and those who worship Him must worship Him in spirit and in truth. God is a spiritual being, immaterial and incorruptible. He is eternal, all-knowing, and all-seeing. A spirit has no flesh or bones, as Jesus pointed out to His disciples upon proving His resurrection, and so cannot age. This is also the reason it is said that God is unseen. John chapter 1, verse 18 declares as such when it says, "No one has seen God at any time." Why is this important? Because of the warning God gave the people of Israel all the way back in Deuteronomy chapter 4, beginning with verse 15. "Take careful heed to yourselves, for you saw no form when the Lord spoke to you at Horeb out of the midst of the fire, lest you act corruptly and make for yourselves a carved image in the form of any figure." So anyone that declares to have seen the face of God, or any image claiming to be a close approximation of God, there to be worshipped and adored, is a liar, a living lie. And anyone that practices such things is in the worst kinds of sin. God, being spirit, also makes Himself aware, self-determined, feeling, capable of emotion. God is also light. Now, I've heard it said, and wrongfully so, that God possesses light. No, God does not merely possess light. He, in fact, is light. He is the source of light. 1 John chapter 1, verse 5 tells us that this is the message which we have heard from Him and declared to you, that God is light, and in Him there is no darkness at all. I believe one of the greatest insults towards God in our modern age is the absolute and undeniable lack of reverence by those who call themselves His children. From the "God is my homeboy" t-shirts or "God is my bowling partner" to the lack of awe when we stand in His presence, we've either forgotten or chosen to dismiss the knowledge of whom it is we're standing before. One of the most vivid word portraits ever committed to paper or parchment of how God should be viewed and therefore revered is found in Paul's first letter to Timothy, somewhere in the last chapter. Actually, it's the 6th chapter, which also happens to be the last chapter, beginning with verse 16. Among the descriptive words Paul uses, we find "He who is blessed and only potentate," or sovereign, the King of kings and Lord of lords, who alone has immortality, dwelling in unapproachable light, whom no man can see or has seen, to whom be honor and everlasting power. I mention this because the manner in which a man sees God is also the manner in which he will approach God. the manner in which he will serve God and worship God as well. If one believes the nature of God to be singular and believes that singularity to be only love, if one views God as a white-haired, bearded fellow dressed in a white robe and sandals who just rolls his eyes and shakes his head all the while smiling benevolently when we commit the most atrocious of sins, then there will be no reverence, no fear of the Lord, no obedience, and no submission. Another aspect of God's nature is love. Yes, God is love. This is an undeniable fact, just as the fact that He is Spirit and He is light. We all know the most famous verse in the Bible, the one that a man wearing a multicolored wig used to hold up at ball games. Yes, John chapter 3, verse 16. For God so loved the world, that He gave His only begotten Son, that whoever believes in Him should not perish, but have everlasting life. This speaks directly to God's heart. This speaks directly to His nature. For love compelled Him to send Jesus, and under this banner of love, we can include His grace, His mercy, His goodness, even His meekness. All these things come under the covering of God's love. To me at least, there is no better definition of God and His love than a passage in 1 John chapter 4, verse 16, where we're simply but profoundly told that God is love, and he who abides in love abides in God, and God in him. Now, there is one more aspect of God's nature that we must cover for this program at least. One that not many want to hear about because, well, it dispels the illusion that God is only love and nothing else. Yes, God is love. Yes, God is light. Yes, God is spirit. But He is also an all-consuming fire. You heard correctly. God is an all-consuming fire. Now, since over 90% of known evangelists and preachers focus on the aspect of God's nature having to do with love exclusively, I would like to attempt and balance the scales, as it were, just a tad, by talking about the aspect of His nature that is an all-consuming fire. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 29 declared succinctly and outright that our God is a consuming fire. This aspect of God's nature, the consuming fire, refers to the holiness of God. For those that believe it is not one of the major aspects of God's nature, that I should not have even mentioned it, please keep in mind that fire is the symbol most associated with God in the Bible. From the burning bush that spoke to Moses to the pillar of fire that led Israel out of Egypt to the tongues of fire that we see fall upon the heads of those gathered in the upper room, yes, God's holiness, the aspect of His nature that is an all-consuming fire, is ever present and readily visible to all who would open their eyes. If we desire to be complete Christians, then we must believe in a complete God. We must accept the fact that although He is love, He is also just. He is righteous and therefore cannot receive sin unto Himself. His righteous indignation burns the sin and consumes it, for He is a consuming fire. Yes, God is light. Not simply one who possesses light, but the actual source thereof, and so He cannot have fellowship with the darkness. Now, if God cannot have fellowship with darkness, can anyone calling themselves His offspring have fellowship with it? No. God is not one-sided or one-dimensional. He does not have one emotion and one emotion only, and we would be wise to remember this fact. When we fall into the snare of believing that God is one-dimensional, that His nature is only one-sided, we run the risk of losing that reverence that is so necessary in our daily walk. This has been, and will be for the foreseeable future, the truth in a nutshell. I am your host, Michael Boldea, and I pray you have been blessed by this teaching today.